The wind screamed like a wounded animal, tearing through the narrow mountain pass, hurling snow in blinding, furious waves. In the heart of Colorado's Rockies, on a night when the temperature had plunged well below zero, the storm didn't just fall from the sky, it attacked. Clinging to the frozen trunk of an ancient pine, a young woman cradled two newborns against her chest. Her hair, unnaturally silver for her 28 years, whipped wildly around her face. Every gust seemed to steal a little more of her strength. "Please, don't fall asleep," she whispered, her lips cracked and bleeding. Those words, barely audible even to herself, should have been swallowed by the storm. But they weren't. Someone, or something, heard them. Her name was Emily Carter. Only 3 years ago, she'd been a bright-eyed newlywed with soft features, a laugh that lit up rooms, and dreams of raising a family in the big white house on the ridge. But that was before the accident, before her husband, Michael Carter, died on an icy mountain road. That night had stolen more than her partner, it had drained the color from her life. The silver that streaked her hair wasn't age. It was grief carved into her very being. When Emily gave birth to her twins, Matthew and Grace, she thought maybe life was offering her a second chance. But Michael's family had other ideas. The Carter estate loomed at the edge of a cliff, a massive Victorian house built in another century, black against the snow. On its grand front porch, Emily stood with her babies wrapped in thin blankets. Facing her was Margaret Carter, Michael's mother, a woman carved from the same cold stone as the mountains themselves. Tall, rail-thin, with steel-gray eyes and hair wound into a perfect chignon, she had the kind of presence that silenced rooms without a word. "They don't carry our blood," Margaret said without looking directly at her daughter-in-law. Her voice was precise, controlled, and utterly merciless. "You're a disgrace, Emily. You'll leave this house tonight." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "They're Michael's children," she managed. Margaret's lip twitched in something between disdain and amusement. "Not in any way that matters." The heavy wooden door opened. The Carter's butler, an aging man named Harris, stepped out, carrying a wicker basket. Inside, a few baby bottles and an extra pair of blankets. No words. No kindness. He placed it at Emily's feet and retreated as if her very presence was a stain. From the shadows just inside the doorway, Isabel Carter, Michael's younger sister, watched. She was only 24, her green eyes hidden behind a long fringe of chestnut hair. She never spoke against her mother. But tonight, before Harris closed the basket, Isabel slipped in a pair of tiny navy mittens, worn thin but still warm. Michael's mittens from when he was a boy. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. No words passed, but Emily understood. The door slammed shut with a sound that felt like the lid of a coffin. Emily stepped down from the porch into the waist-deep snow. The wind hit her like a wall. Her shoes had been taken, she was in wool socks that were already soaked through. She kept walking, clutching her children so tightly they squirmed in protest. Somewhere across the road, a dim light burned in the window of a small cabin. Henry Thompson, a 75-year-old retired rail worker, sat there with a chipped mug of tea. He'd been a widower for nearly a decade, talking mostly to the chickadees that came to his feeder. He couldn't hear the words exchanged on the porch, but he didn't need to. The look on Emily's face told him enough. He tried to stand to go after her, but his knees gave out after 2 steps. All he could do was whisper into the empty room, "God help her." Emily didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stop. The paved road ended, replaced by a narrow trail leading into the forest. Somewhere beyond the ridge was the old cabin where Michael had once talked about building a life with her. By the time she reached the tree line, her fingers had gone numb around the babies. Every breath burned. Her vision tunneled. At the base of a massive, solitary pine standing in the clearing, her knees buckled. She sank to the snow, curling her body around Matthew and Grace. "Please, don't fall asleep," she whispered again, her voice breaking. From the darkness between the trees, 2 amber eyes opened. He stepped forward silently, if a creature his size could be said to step at all. A massive gray wolf, his coat a thick blend of silver and ash, his frame solid as carved granite. A deep scar cut across the left side of his muzzle, a testament to battles survived. His name, though Emily could not know it, was Shadow. Once, years ago, Shadow had belonged to a mountain search and rescue unit. He'd been trained to find lost hikers, to brave avalanches, to stand between danger and the helpless. His handler had been Captain Jack O'Connor, a man who'd treated him as a partner, not a pet. But an avalanche had taken the team, leaving only Shadow alive, and from that night on he kept to the wild, wary of human hands. Until tonight. 10 yards from Emily, Shadow stopped. He could smell the fear, the pain, the blood from her frost-bitten feet, but most of all the newborn scent of the 2 tiny lives she held. His breath plumed in the frozen air. The wind howled. The snow swirled between them. And then, with the deliberation of a creature who understands the weight of choice, Shadow stepped closer. Miles away, in a weather-beaten log cabin tucked between towering pines, John Barrett jolted awake as if someone had shaken his shoulder. 63 years old, broad-shouldered, with hands scarred from a lifetime of hard work, John had the look of a man who'd survived more than his share of winters. His beard was thick and silver, his eyes a steely gray that had seen too much. Once, long ago, those eyes had belonged to an army medic who'd patched up soldiers in desert heat and freezing mountain passes. After the wars and too many funerals, John had walked away from the noise, the lies, the politics. He'd sold everything he owned and built this cabin with his own hands. No electricity, no internet, just a wood-burning stove, a kerosene lamp, and the kind of silence you can only find where the mountains meet the sky. Tonight, though, the silence was wrong. The storm outside battered the cabin walls, but underneath it, John heard something else, a sound sharp and fleeting. A bark. Then, moments later, a low, mournful howl that threaded through the wind like a plea. John swung his legs out of bed, pulled on insulated pants and his old leather boots. He grabbed his lantern, a hatchet, and the long walking staff capped with a steel spike he'd once used for climbing ice. It didn't take long for him to see movement in the snow. A lone figure, half collapsed at the base of the pine in the clearing, clutching something to her chest. And next to her, still as a statue, stood the massive gray wolf. John's breath caught. He knew that wolf. He'd seen him twice before, once watching a fawn from the ridge, another time lying in the snow above a valley, just observing. Shadow. The wolf was no ordinary animal, and John had long since stopped wondering why. "I'm not your enemy," John called softly, raising one hand. "I'm here to help." The wolf's gaze held his for a long, silent moment, long enough for the wind to shift and for John to catch the newborn scent beneath the cold. Then, with a single slow step, Shadow moved aside, clearing the path to the woman. John dropped to his knees in the snow beside her. Her face was pale, lips tinged blue, eyes barely open. The babies, tiny, silent except for a faint whimper, were swaddled in threadbare blankets. "You're gonna be okay," he murmured, checking her pulse with the speed and precision that had never left him. "Weak but there." He pulled a reflective thermal blanket from his pack, wrapping the twins first, tucking them close to his chest under his parka. Then he slid another under the woman, securing it with his belt before lifting her over his shoulder. The trek back was brutal. Snow waist-deep in places, wind clawing at his face, the weight of 2 lives in front and 1 on his back. But John never slowed, not when his knee screamed, not when his breath came in ragged bursts. All the while he felt the wolf's presence at his side. Sometimes close enough that he could hear the crunch of paws in the snow, sometimes disappearing into the storm only to reappear ahead, as if scouting the trail. When they finally reached the cabin, John shouldered the door open and stepped into blessed warmth. The fire in the stove had burned low, but he quickly fed it fresh logs until the room glowed orange. He laid the woman gently on his bed, the twins in a lined wicker basket near the fire. Working fast, he heated water, mixed glucose powder, and dribbled it carefully into her mouth. Then he massaged her hands and feet, coaxing the blood back into her limbs. Shadow slipped inside without a sound, his coat dusted with snow. He settled near the fire, eyes locked not on the flames but on the woman's breathing. "Wanna stay?" John asked quietly. The wolf didn't move, but something in his stillness felt like a yes. Hours passed. The storm raged outside, but inside there was only the crackle of the fire and the soft sounds of life returning. The baby stirred first, tiny cries that filled the cabin with something warm and fragile. Emily's eyes fluttered open soon after, confusion flickering into panic until she spotted the twins. "They're okay," John said, pulling a chair close to her bedside. "You're safe here." She tried to speak, but her voice was a rasp. Who are you?" "John Barrett," he replied. "Live here year-round. Found you in the snow, though I think your friend over there had something to do with it." Emily turned her head, meeting Shadow's amber gaze for the first time. No fear. No threat. Just the strange, unsettling calm of being seen. "It was him," she whispered. John nodded. "Shows up when someone's in trouble. Doesn't stick around otherwise." For the first time in days, maybe weeks, Emily's mouth curved into the ghost of a smile. And then, like a dam breaking, her eyes filled with tears. She cried quietly, holding on to the moment like it might disappear if she moved too fast. John didn't rush her. He just sat there, the fire warming his back, and let her breathe. The storm began to die sometime before dawn. The wind lost its scream, settling into a low, restless moan that slipped through the trees. The snow outside lay deep and heavy, muffling the world. John sat at the table by the window, sipping coffee from a dented steel mug. Across the room, Emily was awake now, cradling Grace while Matthew slept beside her in the basket. Shadow lay near the door, head up, ears twitching at every distant sound. "You should rest," John told her. She shook her head. "I've rested enough. It's being still that scares me. I keep thinking they'll find me." John's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who's they?" Before she could answer, Shadow stiffened. His ears angled forward, his gaze locked on the tree line beyond the cabin. John rose slowly, crossing to the window. At first he saw nothing, just the endless white. Then a flicker of movement. Two figures in dark winter coats, moving cautiously along the ridge, snow crunching under their boots. 3 miles back on a snow-choked trail, Ryan Hale adjusted the strap of his rifle. A former military contractor, he'd spent most of his adult life doing jobs no one talked about in polite company. This wasn't his first hunt, but it was the first time his quarry was a woman carrying 2 newborns. "This doesn't feel right," muttered his partner, Cole Parker, a big man with a slow drawl and eyes that still had kindness buried somewhere deep. Cole had once worked as a game warden in Montana before life, and debt had pushed him into work like this. "Doesn't have to feel right," Ryan replied coldly. "We have orders. Bring her in, no questions." Cole glanced down at the trail ahead and frowned. Large paw prints cut through the fresh snow, deep, deliberate, and recent. "Wolf," he said. "Big one." Ryan smirked. "Perfect. If she's with it, we'll find both." Inside the cabin, John moved quickly but without panic. He crossed to the bed, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. "They're coming," he said simply. Her eyes widened, and for a heartbeat she looked like she might break. But then her grip on Grace tightened, and something steel-hard settled into her expression. "Can you hide us?" she asked. John nodded once. He strode to the far corner of the room, pulling back a worn rug to reveal a heavy wooden hatch. Beneath was a narrow set of stairs leading into a low-ceilinged shelter dug deep into the earth, a place he'd built years ago in case of blizzards, fires, or worse. He took the twins from her, lowering them gently into a lined box in the shelter. Emily climbed down after them, and John covered the hatch again, rolling the rug back into place and shoving a heavy chest over it. From the corner, Shadow rose silently, his gaze flicking between John and the door. "You know what to do," John murmured. The wolf gave a slow blink before slipping through the half-open door, vanishing into the snow without a sound. And here, if this story has pulled you in so far, if you can feel the cold, the fear, the heartbeat of these mountains, take a second to support it. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this story with someone who loves tales that keep them on the edge of their seat. Your support keeps these stories alive. Minutes later, John heard the crunch of boots outside. A knock, 3 hard raps. He opened the door just enough to see 2 strangers on the porch. "Morning," Ryan said casually, snow clinging to his beard. "We're looking for someone." "Woman about yay tall, 2 infants. Might have come this way." "Haven't seen anyone," John replied evenly. "Storm's been too bad for visitors." Ryan's eyes scanned the room behind him, sharp and calculating. Cole, on the other hand, seemed more interested in the wolf tracks in the snow. "Big animal you've got around here," Cole said. John's gaze didn't waver. "Doesn't belong to anyone. Doesn't bother me, I don't bother it." Ryan gave a short, humorless chuckle. "Funny thing about wolves? They tend to lead you straight to what you're hunting." John's grip on the door tightened. "Not this one." The air between them was heavy enough to taste. Finally, Ryan stepped back. "If you see her, let her know people are looking. And not the friendly kind." John closed the door slowly, the latch clicking into place like the cocking of a rifle. For the chase through the pines. Shadow moved like a ghost across the snow, weaving between trees and ridges with the instinct of a creature who'd spent his life surviving here. He didn't run in a straight line. That would have been too easy to track. Instead, he doubled back, looped around, and left prints in places that made no sense to the untrained eye. But Ryan Hale wasn't untrained. The former contractor crouched, brushing snow from a fresh print. "He's playing with us," Ryan muttered, more amused than frustrated. "This wolf's smart." Cole frowned. "Or he's keeping us away from something." Ryan glanced over his shoulder, eyes narrowing. "Exactly." Back at the cabin, John moved quickly. He checked the latch on the door, stoked the fire, and kept his rifle within arm's reach. In the hidden cellar beneath his feet, Emily sat with the twins, listening to every sound above. The hiss of the fire, John's slow, deliberate movements, the distant howl of the wind. She thought of Michael. Thought of the night he died, and the quiet way his mother had looked at her afterward, like she was already erasing her from the family. It made sense now. This was never just about grief. It was about control. And if Margaret Carter couldn't control Emily, she would take what mattered most. Half a mile from the cabin, Shadow stopped on a ridge. His amber eyes scanned the trail below until he caught sight of movement, 2 dark shapes cutting across the white. He lowered himself into the snow, tail still, breath slow. When Ryan and Cole came into view, Shadow sprang forward, not toward them but past them, brushing close enough that Cole flinched and cursed. "What the—" Cole started, but Ryan was already turning. "He's leading us somewhere," Ryan said. "Let's see where." They followed, boots punching into the crust of snow, weapons at the ready. Shadow's path led them into a narrow ravine where the snow was deep and the walls of ice and rock closed in tight. The tracks wound between boulders, vanishing and reappearing, until the men were too far in to turn back quickly. That's when they heard the sharp crack above them. Cole looked up in time to see a shelf of snow breaking loose from the ridge. "Avalanche!" he shouted, diving for cover as tons of snow roared down. Ryan managed to wedge himself between 2 rocks, but by the time the rumble faded, the ravine entrance was choked with a wall of white. They were trapped. And the wolf was gone. Back at the cabin, John felt the subtle shift in the air, the way experienced mountain men do when danger moves away. He exhaled, tension easing just a fraction. He crossed to the hatch, pulling the chest aside and lifting the rug. Emily looked up from below, eyes wide. "They're not coming," John said. "Not today." She climbed up carefully, holding Matthew while John helped her lift Grace. Shadow padded in through the door a moment later, his coat dusted with powder, his eyes bright. Emily stared at him, realization dawning. You saved us." The wolf didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there in the doorway, snow swirling around him like smoke. John smiled faintly. "He has a habit of showing up for the right people." Emily settled back into the chair by the fire, both twins against her chest. For the first time since she'd been forced from the Carter house, the knot of fear in her chest loosened. But she knew it wasn't over. Somewhere Margaret Carter was waiting. And a woman like that didn't let go, not until she got what she wanted. 3 weeks later, the snow in Pine Ridge had begun to soften, pulling back from the roads and rooftops, but the chill of winter still clung to the air. The small-town courthouse sat on Main Street, its red brick walls warmed by pale morning sun. Inside, every bench was full, neighbors, townsfolk, and more than a few who had heard whispers of what had happened high up in the mountains. Emily sat at the front beside John, Matthew and Grace bundled in a double stroller at her side. Across the aisle, Margaret Carter sat ramrod straight, her pearl earrings gleaming in the light, eyes sharp as glass. Her lawyer flipped through papers with a rehearsed air of confidence. Judge Harper, a woman in her 60s with the kind of voice that could cut through a room, tapped her gavel. "We're here to address the matter of custody and the allegations brought forward by Mrs. Emily Carter." Emily stood, her hands steady as she placed a folded document on the table before the judge. "This is Michael Carter's will, signed and notarized. It names me as the sole legal guardian of our children and grants me residence in the Carter family home until they reach 18. Gasps rippled through the room. Margaret's lips thinned. From the second row, Isabel Carter rose to her feet. In her hands was a notarized statement. "I found this in my brother's safe," she said, voice clear. "A copy was held with his attorney. It's genuine." Judge Harper examined both documents before passing them to the clerk. Her expression didn't change, but the faintest flicker of satisfaction touched her eyes. Margaret leaned toward her attorney, whispering sharply, but before they could react, another voice rose from the back of the room. It was Sheriff Tom Daniels holding a folded slip of paper. This was taken from the jacket of Andrew Carter, Margaret's younger son, during a routine search last month. He unfolded it and read aloud, "Remove the children at the first opportunity. Eliminate the mother. File for guardianship citing unfitness. Contact Ryan Hale. Payment upon transfer of custody." A heavy silence fell over the room. Margaret's face remained frozen, but her hands, white-knuckled in her lap, betrayed her. Judge Harper set down her gavel. "I've heard enough. The will stands. Custody remains with Mrs. Carter. This court is adjourned." The gavel struck wood, and the sound echoed like a door slamming shut, only this time not on Emily. 2 months later, the old barrack cabin had been transformed. One half remained John's home. The other, once a cold storage room and empty loft, was now the Pine Ridge Animal Rescue and Reading Room, a place where children could come to read by the fire while rescued animals recovered in warm, safe spaces. Emily worked the front, greeting visitors with an open smile. Her silver hair, once a mark of grief, now shone like a badge of survival. She read aloud to groups of children while Matthew and Grace played quietly nearby. Shadow had claimed the front porch as his own. Though age had slowed him, he still rose when visitors arrived, padding forward with the dignity of a soldier. If a child cried, he would sit close enough for small hands to rest on his back, staying there until the tears stopped. Isabel came often, bringing books and supplies. Cole Parker stopped by once, quietly leaving a bag of feed for the animals before heading back down the mountain without a word. And John had begun to smile again. Some mornings, Emily caught him sketching by the fire, his rough hands moving with surprising gentleness as he captured the people and animals who now filled the cabin with life. One spring afternoon, Emily stepped out onto the porch where Shadow lay, the sun warming his fur. She stood there for a long moment looking out over the mountains. "That storm didn't kill us," she said softly. "It brought us home." Shadow lifted his head, his amber eyes fixed on the distant tree line. Emily followed his gaze, wondering if he sensed someone out there in need of help, someone else waiting for a hand or a paw to pull them back from the edge. Because miracles, she had learned, don't always arrive in a blaze of light. Sometimes they come in the form of an old wolf with a wise gaze, a man who refuses to give up, and a stranger's kindness when the world has turned its back. And if you've stayed with this story until now, thank you. If it touched your heart, if you felt the cold wind and the warmth of the fire, help us keep these stories alive. Subscribe to the channel, click the like button, and share this video with someone who believes in the power of hope. And tell us in the comments, what part of this story stayed with you the most? I read every one, and your words keep these stories burning bright.